what it's like? To bury a truth so deep you forget it was ever real? Winter of 2000, I returned to Echo Hollow with 3 men I once called brothers. 20 years earlier, we left that forest pretending Will, the boy who vanished, was just a tragic accident. A bear attack, we said, but we lied. The truth is, Will didn't die. He was taken and protected by something ancient. Something the world calls a monster. But in that forest, we weren't the victims, we were the trespassers. I'm Royce Maddox. I live alone now, in the same cabin that once echoed with Will's laughter. I've carried this silence for decades, but I need you to hear what we saw, what we did. Because in Echo Hollow, the forest remembers, it judges. It doesn't attack with teeth, but with memory, with guilt. One by one, it showed us who we really were. Julian, he stayed behind by choice, to atone. The rest of us? We tried to leave, but not all of us made it. Before I disappeared, I left this recording for Will's niece. A warning, or maybe a prayer. If you're hearing this, know this. The knocks are real. The forest is watching, and it never forgets. It begins with the sound of snow, not the peaceful kind. No. These footsteps were fast, staggered. Someone was running, breathing hard. The crunch of boots over frozen earth and the rasp of air too cold to swallow right. That sound still haunts me. Then the screen lit up. I was watching a tape, old warped mini DV, the kind no one uses anymore. But I kept it for decades, even though I shouldn't have. Static crackled, then a flicker of shaky light. A flashlight beam cutting through pitch-black wood, swinging too fast. Breathing, erratic. Then a scream. Not long, just a single desperate burst. The camera jolted and caught it, just for a second. That face, covered in hair. Amber eyes, too human to be safe. It looked straight into the lens like it knew we were watching. And then it was gone. I turned off the TV. My hand hovered over the old cassette recorder. The thing still worked somehow. The buttons were faded, the speaker hissed like it had its own ghosts. But it recorded. That's all I needed. I pressed record. If someone's hearing this tape, please believe me, because they never came back, and I don't deserve forgiveness. My name's Royce Maddox. I'm 62 now. Most days I wish I wasn't. But I wake up anyway. Same cabin, same wood stove, same damn mountain breathing down my neck like it remembers. I tried forgetting. I did. For 20 years I buried it, but it clawed its way back up. You can't bury the truth when it still screams under the snow. I stood up and walked across the room. My knees cracked. The fire in the stove popped, dry pine splitting like gunshots. I pulled the old map off the shelf, creased and torn from 100 folds and unfolds, and pinned it to the wall. One red dot, that's all. A single mark in the middle of nothing. Echo Hollow. Even the name sounds like a warning. Outside, the wind scraped against the windows like it wanted in. I tightened my sweater and stared at that red dot like it was a wound that never healed. The kind that scabs but bleeds when you remember too hard. And I remembered too hard. There was laughter once. Before, 4 boys around a campfire tossing marshmallows into flames, swearing they'd never grow old. I can still hear it. Julian's dry laugh. Aaron doing that stupid bear impression. Danny trying to record everything with his camcorder, swearing one day we'd sell it to some cable TV show. And Will, God Will, his voice was the softest. Just a kid. That red hoodie of his always too big, sleeves swallowing his hands. He sang sometimes, under his breath. Not loud, just like he was singing to something only he could hear. Like the forest had a tune he was trying to hum along with. Then the gunshot, then the screaming, then the silence that's never left me since. I lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. I hadn't smoked in years. But tonight was different. Because I'd gotten a letter. Real one. Handwritten. Postmarked from a town I thought had burned off the map. Julian, he's dying. lungs finally giving out from all those years underground, literally. He said it's time. The last trip, he called it. Capital L, capital T, like a goddamn pilgrimage. Said we made a promise. Said we'd go back. One last time. Where it all ended or began. I don't know anymore. I do remember the pact, though. We made it in a thunderstorm under that old ranger tower before it collapsed. Swore that if the nightmares got too loud, if the truth got too heavy, we'd go back. Together. Find whatever was left. Or at least bury it right. I folded the map, tucked it into my coat, grabbed the cassette recorder still ticking with its little red light. You know, people think you only lose your soul once, but that's not true. You can lose it a piece at a time, with every lie, every choice you don't undo. And I lost mine out there. Somewhere between the fire and the scream and the look in Will's eyes when I left him, I packed light, just essentials. It wasn't the kind of trip where you brought things you planned on bringing back. It's the kind where the silence is heavier than the gear. I called Danny. He didn't answer at first. Took a few tries. But when he heard my voice, there was a pause, a long one, like he'd been waiting for it. Like he knew this day was crawling toward us for years. Then just 2 words. I'm in. Aaron was harder. He's got a daughter now. Retired firefighter, keeps himself busy pretending the past never happened. But I knew that bark in his voice was a cover. I told him Julian was dying, that we owed him. Owed all of them. There was another pause. Where do we meet? And just like that, it began again. I sat back in my chair. The fire was dying. I didn't add more wood, let it dim. Let the shadows stretch across the room like memories I couldn't escape. I looked over at the wall where I'd pinned the photos. Old Polaroids yellowed at the edges. Us. Smiling, dirt on our cheeks, eyes too bright for what we were about to lose. One shot in particular always chills me. We're all in frame except way back in the corner behind the trees. There's something, barely visible, but there. A shape, a shadow. Not a man, not a bear. Just something. And none of us ever saw it. Not back then. Not until years later when I found the photos again and stared too long. It's funny, the way the past hides things in plain sight. How you can live your life thinking you made it out until you realize you just ran. The wind howled. A tree branch scratched the roof like it was trying to say something. I pressed stop on the recorder. My hand hovered over the eject button, but I didn't pull the tape out. Not yet. Because the story wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It started with a letter. Real paper. Real ink. Postmarked from Ash Grove, West Virginia, just south of where it all began. The envelope was thin. Barely anything inside. But when I opened it, I swear I could smell the pine and old campfire smoke like it had been trapped between those folds all this time. The handwriting shook me. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. Julian's. Royce, I don't have much time left. My lungs are ash. I can barely breathe anymore, but I remember. God help me, I remember everything. You promised. One last trip. Meet me at the waterline October 19th. Julian. That was all. No greeting, no goodbye, just a countdown. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat by the stove and stared at the flame dancing inside like it might burn the guilt out of my bones. But nothing ever does. And the more I stared, the more I felt the weight of that old promise crawling back to life. There was no walking away from it anymore. We'd all made that pact under the stars, half drunk and scared and still too young to understand what kind of ghosts we were creating. If the truth got too heavy, if the silence started to eat at us, we'd go back. And now Julian was dying. I dug out the rotary phone from the cabinet. Hadn't used it in years, but it still worked. The number I had for Danny was old, but the same voice picked up on the 4th ring. He sounded tired, like the world had worn him down, same as me. When I said Julian's name, he didn't even ask why I was calling. He just whispered, "Where?" Next was Aaron. That one stung a little more. He'd moved to Harrisburg after retirement, lived with his daughter and her boy, tried hard to play the part of a man who didn't carry anything in his chest but fresh air and good deeds. But I knew better. He was the one who screamed Will's name the loudest when it happened. He didn't answer when I called. So I left a message, told him everything. I waited. Then 2 hours later, he called back. I could hear the TV in the background, cartoons or something. He didn't say yes, didn't have to. He just said, "Send me the spot." We met a week later. The diner was in Dry Creek, halfway up the range. Nothing fancy. Still had jukeboxes built into the booths and linoleum floors worn through in all the right places. Danny looked older than I remembered. He'd grown out a beard. Had that kind of stillness about him that only people who've stared down their worst moment can carry. He brought the camcorder with him. Still worked too. I don't know why that made me want to cry. Aaron showed up last. Big coat, boots scuffed to hell, a new scar across his cheek. Said he got it pulling a guy out of a fire back in '98. Said it like it mattered, like it gave him something back. We didn't shake hands, just nodded. That's how we always were, never much for ceremony. Julian never showed. We waited till dark, ordered coffee twice, watched the snow start to fall outside. I figured maybe he couldn't make it. Maybe the sickness took him before he could. But then the waitress came over with a brown paper envelope. "The guy left this here this morning," she said. "Said you'd understand." Inside were copies of our old trail maps and a photo. Us, 20 years ago, campfire at our feet, forest behind us, all 5 of us laughing like we had nothing to lose. And Will. He was off-center, barely in frame. Red hoodie, smile so wide you could feel it. But the weird thing, behind him, just beyond the tree line, there was a shape. Not a person, not a bear, just a blur. Like the woods had bent around something solid that wasn't supposed to be there. None of us said anything for a long while. Then I looked at them. One last trip. Aaron exhaled slow, like he was deflating. I never stopped dreaming about that night. Danny nodded. We should have gone back then. We left the diner just after 9. It was snowing steady by then. Not thick, but steady. Like the mountain was setting a tone before we even stepped foot back on it. We split up for the night. Had to grab gear, say half-truths to people who wouldn't understand. I told myself we were just fulfilling a promise, giving Julian peace. But deep down, I knew better. We weren't doing this for Julian. We were doing this because we couldn't live with ourselves unless we did. The next morning, we met at the trailhead. Same place we'd hiked in from all those years ago. Same gravel pull-off, same crooked wooden sign with Echo Hollow carved in by someone with a hunting knife and too much time. There were no words, just boots crunching snow. Danny powered on the old camcorder. Aaron slung his axe across his back. And I stared at the woods ahead, darker than I remembered. I took one step, then another, and the forest swallowed us whole. We left the trailhead just after dawn. Fog hung low across the ground like breath frozen in midair. Every tree limb was heavy with frost, drooping like they'd been waiting decades to witness this moment. The old gravel path was barely visible, swallowed by undergrowth and moss, as if the mountain had tried to erase any trace of our last time here. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. Every step forward felt like we were walking straight into a place time had given up on. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. I mean, quiet. Not just the kind that happens when you're far from a highway. I'm talking the kind of quiet that presses in on your eardrums, makes you start second-guessing your own heartbeat. At first there were birds, the occasional squirrel scattering through brush, wind tapping against the treetops. But somewhere past the second mile, it all just stopped. Like someone flipped a switch and pulled the soundtrack right out from under us. No warning, no reason. We crossed the old wooden bridge mid-morning, or what was left of it. Half the boards were rotted out, slats missing like teeth in a dead man's grin. The handrails were gone. All that remained were two moss-covered beams leading over a narrow gorge with black water snarling underneath. Aaron went first. Said if it held him, it'd hold all of us. I waited till last. My hands were sweating even though the air was damn near freezing. I kept my eyes on the treetops ahead, not the water below. When I stepped off the bridge, something cracked underfoot behind me. But when I spun around, there was nothing there. Just that fog rolling slow behind us, too slow to be natural. We made camp by the lake around 4. It was the same lake. I recognized the crooked birch tree leaning out over the water like it was bowing to something beneath the surface. The fire pit was long gone, but I still knew the shape of the clearing. Will disappeared here 20 years ago, right where I was now standing. It didn't look any different. That made it worse somehow. I knelt by the edge of the water, pulled the small wooden cross from my bag and pushed it into the soil. My fingers shook. The ground was frozen, resisted me at first, like it didn't want to let me plant that guilt into it. But I forced it in. Just enough so it stood on its own. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The water lapped gently against the shore like it was breathing slow, half asleep but listening. Julian sat down without a word. His breath was rattling, coming out in uneven clouds. He looked smaller than I remembered, not just thinner, diminished, like a man hollowed out from the inside. He pulled his coat tighter around him and stared into the fire like it might offer some kind of forgiveness. Night came hard. The cold hit deeper than it had any right to. Even with the fire going, even with our layers. It wasn't just the temperature, it was the stillness. No wind, no rustling. The kind of silence that made the hairs on your arms stand up and stay up. Like we weren't alone. Not exactly watched, not yet, but noticed. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound. 3 knocks. Not loud, not hurried, spaced evenly like someone rapping against a door they didn't want to open. I held my breath, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Then it happened again. 3 dull thuds. Not wood on wood, more like bone on bark. Aaron stirred, sat up in his sleeping bag, squinting toward the edge of camp. Probably a branch, he mumbled. But Julian was wide awake. I saw the way he clutched the blanket to his chest, knuckles white, face pale as the frost on the tent walls. He didn't say a word, just shook his head, slow and terrified. I stepped out of the tent just as the fire cracked. The moon was hidden behind clouds, but the lake reflected something faint, just enough to see the mud along the shoreline. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, not ours, larger, deeper. 4 toes, maybe 5. It was hard to count. But they were big, wider than my boot by a few inches at least. Whatever made them didn't sink all the way down, but it wasn't light either. The tracks led from the tree line to the edge of camp, circled the fire, then stopped. Right behind my tent, there were no exit tracks. The mud hadn't shifted. No drag marks, no reverse prints, just gone. Like whatever it was stood there inches from where I'd been sleeping and then vanished into the air. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I whispered for Danny. He came out, saw the prints, and immediately raised the camcorder. But it was too dark. The footage wouldn't show anything. I knew that. Still, we tried. The trees were still. No movement, no animals, no wind. Just the occasional snap of a branch, far off, never close enough to be sure. And the air was thick, not with fog this time, but with something heavier. Like dread had weight and we were breathing it in. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. I kept the fire going till sunrise, feeding it every few minutes like the flame was the only thing keeping us tethered to the world we knew. I thought about the sound, the knocking, 3 slow beats. Not random, not a branch, a rhythm. Something was testing us, watching, waiting. And the worst part, the part that still makes my skin crawl even now, is that I wasn't afraid of being hunted. I was afraid we were being remembered. The second night came colder, deeper. We'd only been there 48 hours, maybe less, but already I could feel something in the forest beginning to shift. Not the weather, not the trail. Something inside it. Like the trees had started paying attention. Like they finally remembered who we were. Aaron was agitated all day. He kept pacing near the tree line, muttering under his breath, snapping at every small sound like a coil wound too tight. Julian barely spoke, sat beside the fire, coughing into his scarf, face pale and drawn. Danny stayed close to the camera. He kept aiming it into the fog, into the empty and pressing record, even when there was nothing to see. He said it made him feel like he was framing the silence, capturing proof of what we couldn't name. I didn't argue. We all had our ways of not going insane. We didn't talk much during dinner. I remember the canned stew tasted like metal. Nobody had the appetite. I kept glancing at the water's edge, that same crooked birch leaning over the lake, its reflection thin and warped under the moonlight. The night sky was cloudless this time. Stars scattered above us, but they felt too far away. Too indifferent. The kind of stars that watch, but don't care. The fire popped once, loud, and everyone flinched. Around midnight, Aaron got up, said he was going to take a leak. Danny offered to go with him. Aaron waved him off. "I'm not 12, he snapped, vanishing past the tree line before anyone could say otherwise. I stared into the dark after him. My gut twisted. Julian sat up straighter, eyes locked on the black space where Aaron had disappeared. A full minute passed, then 2. Then it began. The air changed first, went still like everything, trees, wind, even the night was holding its breath. Then came the sound. Faint at first, garbled, muffled, like someone screaming through water. A choked kind of scream, not human, not fully. It stretched too long, wavered, then snapped off like a wire pulled too tight. My blood went cold. Danny grabbed the flashlight. I grabbed the axe. Julian didn't move, just kept whispering, "No, no, no," over and over like a prayer he knew wouldn't get answered. We ran. The flashlight beam cut through the fog and flickers, useless in the thicket. Branches slapped our faces. Snow crunched under our boots in frantic rhythm. We called Aaron's name. Nothing. Then suddenly, light. A faint glint near a clearing. Danny reached it first, dropped to his knees. The flashlight, lying on its side in the dirt, still flickering weakly. Next to it, blood, thick, fresh, soaking into the frozen moss like black paint. And beside it, a tree trunk, scarred, indented, like something massive had slammed into it hard enough to split the bark. No tracks leading in, none leading out, just impact, just damage, and silence. I stood there, breath burning in my chest, staring at that scene like it might suddenly make sense if I stared hard enough. Danny was shaking. His voice kept catching as he muttered, "It was fast, too fast, like it didn't touch the ground." That's when I remembered the old trail camera. We'd strapped it to a pine our first night, facing out over the lake. One of the models from the late 90s, motion sensor, infrared lens, digital cassette. I sprinted back to camp, ripped the device off the tree, nearly broke it, fumbling to load the playback. The screen was tiny, grainy, but it lit up. Danny and Julian gathered beside me. The fire had nearly died. The feed started. Static at first, then night vision. Hours sped by, fast-forwarded stars overhead, trees unmoving. Then motion, a figure, small, running. At first I thought it was Aaron, but the frame showed someone shorter, younger, a boy. And he was terrified, arms pumping, red hoodie flapping behind him. My heart stopped. It was Will, from 20 years ago. Captured, pixelated, preserved on a tape that should have degraded by now. He ran past the lens, gasping, glancing over his shoulder. Behind him, movement. Something massive, towering, covered in matted fur, moving with uncanny silence. Not chasing, just following. Long arms, hunkered posture, eyes like coals glowing in the dark. It wasn't hunting him. It wasn't grabbing for him. It was staying with him. I stopped the tape. No one said a word. Julian looked at me, voice shaking. But Will wasn't killed. His eyes filled with something that wasn't just fear. It was memory. Guilt. The kind that doesn't fade even when you bury it deep. He wasn't taken, Julian said. He was followed. I didn't know what to say. All this time we thought he'd been snatched, devoured, left for dead in a place that didn't want to give him back. But this tape, showed something else, a different kind of story. One that didn't make sense in the ways we understood danger. We sat there in the half-dead firelight, the trees still watching, the fog curling tighter around our camp like fingers slowly closing. And somewhere in the dark beyond the trees, something was still walking. Still watching, not out of rage, but memory. We didn't speak for a long time after watching the tape. That old trail cam had captured more than footage. It had unearthed something in us that none of us were ready to face. The fire burned low. Julian sat still, his eyes reflecting the dying flames. His breathing had turned shallow, wheezing like the forest itself was coiled inside his lungs. I watched him pull something from his coat. Not a flask, not a lighter. A small photo, weathered and bent at the edges. He turned it toward the flames, not to burn it, just to remember the face. Will, 12 years old, that red hoodie, that quiet smile. I hadn't seen that picture in decades. He spoke before I could ask. You remember the cave-in on Echo Ridge? His voice cracked on the last syllable. That's when I knew something was wrong. With all of us. I nodded. Of course I remembered. We all did. But Julian wasn't talking about the rocks or the collapse. He was talking about what we did before that, what we didn't do. Will wasn't slow, he whispered. He wasn't weak. But that night when it all went to hell, He stopped. I waited. He swallowed hard and looked right at me. You told us to keep going. The words didn't hit like bullets. They hit like water, rising slow, choking, pulling down. And it was true. I had said it. I'd screamed it. Don't stop. Keep going. Just run. I thought it was a bear. That's what I told myself for years. I heard the growl. I saw the trees shift. And all I could think about was getting my son out, getting the others out. I never turned back. I never looked for Will. He'd been behind me. He always walked at the back, lagging like he was listening to something deeper in the woods. I left him. We all did. But I gave the order. Julian didn't accuse me. He didn't need to. We sat in the dark, the cold creeping into our bones like a punishment. I used to dream about him, Julian continued. He'd be standing in the fog, not saying anything, just looking at me, not angry, not scared, just waiting. Like he was giving me a chance to speak first. Danny had wandered away from the fire by then. He was near the boulders at the edge of camp, kneeling beside one of them with his flashlight shaking in his hand. I stood and walked over. What he showed me didn't make sense at first. Carvings on the surface of the stone, deep, clean, not eroded. Symbols. Some looked like hands, others like eyes. Some resembled trees or maybe fire. It was hard to tell. They weren't English, weren't any language I'd seen, but they felt like language, intentional, like someone or something had taken time to speak without words. Danny reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of one spiral. It was warm, warmer than it should have been. Like the stone had a pulse. What do you think it means? He asked, voice low. Julian answered from behind us. It's not for us to understand. We turned. He was standing now, barely. But his eyes were locked on the carvings like he'd seen them before, somewhere deep in memory. I think it's a warning, he said, or maybe a memorial. To Will? I asked. No, he said, to something older. The wind shifted then. Not strong, but enough to move the trees. A rhythm again. 3 slow groans from the branches overhead. The same cadence. Like those knocks from the other night had grown limbs and were now passing through the canopy, unseen but heard. We went still. Danny lowered the flashlight. Julian knelt by the stone, placed the photo of Will on top of it. "I was the last one to see him," he said. "I didn't breathe. We were running. You'd already gone ahead. Aaron too. Danny fell, you remember, scraped his leg on that log. And I turned back to help him. Will had stopped. Right at the edge of the hill. He wasn't crying, wasn't yelling, just standing there, looking at something behind the trees, and then his voice caught, and he smiled. That part broke me. I called to him, told him to run, but he didn't move. He just looked back at me, that little half smile of his. And then something stepped out from the trees. Tall, covered in shadow, but Will didn't scream. He walked to it like he knew it. Or it knew him. It didn't reach for him, it knelt. Julian's voice dropped to a whisper. He climbed onto its back. My knees went weak. I didn't tell anyone, I couldn't. You would have said I imagined it, that I was panicked, but I saw it. He chose to go, and the thing, it didn't hurt him, it waited, it protected him. Danny sat down hard on the frozen ground, like the weight of that truth hit all at once. Julian ran a hand across the carvings again, slower this time. We called them monsters, but maybe they're just the only ones who remember what we forgot. I didn't sleep that night, none of us did. I wandered into the trees around 3 a.m., not far. Just enough to clear my head. That's when I saw it, hanging from a low branch, barely swaying in the breeze. A hoodie, faded red, threadbare, covered in frost. I reached up and touched it. It was still warm, like it had just been worn. I didn't scream, didn't call for the others. I just stood there, my breath hanging in the cold, watching that piece of Will sway gently back and forth like a heartbeat too stubborn to die. And somewhere past the trees, I swear I heard a voice humming. Not close, but not far. It started with a scream that didn't sound like fear, more like distance, like someone yelling through water, swallowed up before the echo could find us. I was the first to notice Danny was gone. 1 minute he was standing near the stones, tracing the carvings with his fingers, flashlight shaking. The next, empty space. No crunch of boots, no warning. Just gone. Julian thought maybe he wandered off to take a leak or cool down, but I knew better. Danny wasn't the kind to wander in silence. He liked noise, even if it was nervous rambling. I called out. Nothing came back, not even birdsong. The woods were too still again, not silent from peace, but absence. Like something else had stepped in and made the rest retreat. We followed the tree line east, sticking close, speaking low. The fog had started rolling in again, thicker than before. Heavy. It dragged low to the ground like a moving wall, swallowing the trail, the sky, our breath. You couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, crawling across the trees like they'd been unchained. Every few steps I'd think I heard his voice, just ahead, just out of reach. Then it'd vanish. Julian kept coughing. His legs were shaking. I wanted to tell him to go back to camp, but I couldn't find the strength to break the moment. Something about this part of the forest felt older. Not in years, in presence, like it knew what we were looking for and didn't care if we were ready. I found the stone circle by accident. Or maybe it found me. I was pushing through a patch of cedar, trying to keep my bearings by landmarks that no longer made sense, when I stepped through a clearing and felt the air change. Colder, but not sharp like wind, hollow, like walking into a sealed room that shouldn't exist. The ground was bare, stripped of snow in a perfect ring. At the center, a pit lined with flat stones, blackened by time, not fire. Bones scattered across it, deer maybe. Some smaller, some not so easy to name. Around the edge, handprints, dozens of them, children's, small, smudged in ash. They weren't just painted, they were pressed into the stone as if whoever made them left something behind deeper than pigment. A message, or maybe a cry. I stepped closer and felt something under my boot shift. Not soil, not rock. A stick bent into a spiral. Others surrounded it. Woven shapes, animal jawbones tied together with twine, feathers caked in darkened blood. Some of the totems were arranged like guardians facing inward. Others pointed outward like warding symbols keeping something trapped inside. My stomach turned. The fog thickened. And just like that, the world tilted. I don't remember falling, just the sensation of weightlessness, a snap of vertigo. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes, the sky was darker. Not night, just gone. No sun, no moon. Just that gray wash of colorless light you get before a thunderstorm. My limbs were heavy, my breath shallow. The circle was still there, but it felt larger, as if time had widened it while I was unconscious. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Not rushing, not hunting, just coming. I didn't move, I couldn't. It stepped into view like a figure walking out of a dream. Massive. Easily 9 feet. Shoulders broad. Chest heaving with slow animal breaths. Covered in thick gray fur. Matted in places with pine needles and streaks of old mud. But it wasn't the size that broke me, it was the posture, the stillness, the way it didn't dominate the space but belonged to it, like a tree or a storm. Its eyes met mine, not red, not glowing, amber, deep, sad, ancient. The kind of sadness that doesn't rage, it remembers. We stared at each other in silence, then it stepped closer. Not threatening, curious, like it was trying to read me the same way I was trying to read it. Its breath came in slow huffs. Warm, visible. I should have run. But instead, I reached up, hand trembling. It knelt, slowly, one arm resting on its thigh, the other extending, palm open. I didn't know what it wanted until it touched my forehead. The sensation was immediate, not pain, not electricity, something else. A pressure behind the eyes, like the moment right before sleep pulls you under, and then images. I saw Will, not dead, not screaming, just small, cold, curled up against a rock in the snow, crying, alone, until something stepped toward him, not this creature, a different one, smaller but same build, gray fur, large hands. It didn't drag him, didn't bite, it wrapped him in its arms, carried him like a father carries a sleeping child, through the woods, past traps, away from fire. Then I saw others, a group, not a tribe, a family, moving through the forest like shadows, carrying bones, marking trees, mourning their own, hiding from men who came with torches and guns and lies. Men like us. And Will, growing older, still wearing that red hoodie, now tattered and small on his lanky frame. But his eyes, they were different, not afraid, not lost. He looked like he belonged. Then, a different kind of image. Fire, smoke, panic. Humans. A shot. And then stillness. When I came back to myself, the creature was gone. The fog had thinned. The clearing felt quiet again. Not empty. Just resting. I stumbled out. Found Julian not far from the edge. He looked up at me like he already knew what I'd seen. He didn't ask. Just handed me a flask, which I didn't take. My hands were still shaking. We sat there for a while. The silence no longer felt like punishment, more like witness. Somewhere nearby, I could hear the trees creaking, not from wind, but from weight. We were not alone, but we were not unwelcome. We burned the medallion just before sunrise. It had been with me for 20 years, tucked in a drawer, buried under maps and forgotten letters. Brass, round, cheap, the kind you give to a kid to make them feel special. Will had worn it the whole trip back then. It had his initials on it. We all had one. 4 boys, 1 child we promised to protect. I kept his, I don't know why. Guilt's a strange thing. It makes you keep the worst pieces like trophies you never want to show anyone. The fire cracked as the flames licked it clean. It curled, blackened, split. Something in me did too. Julian sat close, wrapped in a blanket thinner than he'd ever been. His breathing was uneven, shallow. He didn't have many words left, and he knew it. But he handed me something while the last of the brass hissed into ash. His journal, spiral-bound, water-stained, corners torn from time and regret. "I wrote everything down," he said. "The truth, the things we left out. I didn't want to open it. Not there. Not yet." But my fingers did anyway. The first pages were shaky handwriting. He'd started it after the original trip, maybe as a way to deal. Then it turned sharper, more detailed, drawings, symbols. That same stone circle over and over, like he couldn't stop dreaming about it. A memory that wouldn't sit still, but it was the entry from 3 weeks ago that stuck. I read it under my breath. They are not what we called them, not beasts, not devils. They remember more than we do. They bury their dead. They sing over their bones. We do not. I closed the book. The trees around us had gone silent again. But not empty. It was like the air was holding its own breath, waiting for what we'd do next. And then I heard it. Footsteps, not crashing, no underbrush breaking, just weight, steady, measured, like something large and old and certain was moving with purpose. I stood, and so did they. One, then another, and another. They didn't charge, they didn't growl. They surrounded us like mourners entering a chapel. Tall, massive, covered in earth-colored fur and snowmelt. Their faces were unreadable, but their eyes, God, their eyes weren't blank. They were watching us, not like predators, but like witnesses. Not one moved closer. They just stood, forming a perimeter, as if they were waiting for something from us, a sign, a word, a decision. I didn't know what to give them, but Julian did. He pushed himself up, legs trembling, body sagging with the weight of time and memory. He stepped into the center of the clearing, the fire at his back, and he said one thing, just loud enough for the wind to carry it. We left him behind. He didn't cry, he didn't beg, he just said it. Aaron stepped forward too. His hands shook as he pulled out the only thing he had left, Will's old compass. Rusted, cracked, but the needle still swung. He laid it on the ground. Danny didn't speak. He pulled out the camcorder, set it down, turned it off. Then I stepped forward. I didn't bring anything but my voice. We forgot him all these years, but we remember now. Not to be forgiven, just so he's not forgotten again. I swear to God, they listened. The largest of them, the one I recognized from the circle, bowed its head. Not deep, not dramatic. Just enough to make the trees shift behind him. Then another did, and another, then silence. Julian collapsed. I caught him before he hit the snow. His body was too light, too hollow. His eyes stayed open, locked on the sky, but his breath left him. Just like that, quiet, no struggle, just gone. I held him while the fire burned low. The others still stood, surrounding us. No one spoke. Then the wind picked up. Not hard, not violent. Just enough to catch the ashes from the fire. Julian's journal, the medallion, the compass. They lifted slowly, spiraling upward, caught in a current none of us could feel, until the smoke turned to mist and drifted into the trees. The creatures moved, not toward us, away, back into the fog, one by one. Silent, their shapes fading between trunks, dissolving into morning light like shadows retreating from memory. We didn't move for a long time after that, not because we were afraid, but because we finally understood what it meant to be remembered, and what it meant to carry the weight of forgetting for too long. There are no words for that kind of stillness, only silence, and the breath between forgiveness and grief. We didn't speak on the way down, not because there was nothing left to say, but because every word felt like it might shatter the silence we'd earned. The trail felt longer this time, or maybe it was just heavier. Every step away from Echo Hollow was a step away from something we'd finally come to understand, and maybe never should have touched at all. Julian stayed behind. I carried his journal. Danny carried the camcorder, Tape still inside, though I'm not sure he'd ever press play again. Aaron. He walked a few steps ahead like a man still listening for something in the trees behind him. When we reached the road, the fog hadn't lifted. It followed us all the way to the edge like it was making sure we got out safe. Or maybe it just wanted to be sure we left. It was another hour before we reached the truck. The same one we'd parked just days ago, though it felt like another life. There was frost on the windshield. The kind that forms when something watches from the tree line, breathing slow. Danny turned the engine over without a word. Aaron climbed into the back, boots still damp, eyes red but dry. I slid into the passenger seat and didn't look back until we hit the first bend in the road. Even then, I didn't see anything. Just trees. Just mist. Just memory. Julian didn't make it out with us, but he did what he came to do. So did we, in a way. Not by proving anything. Not by bringing back evidence or answers, but by standing in front of something we didn't understand and finally having the courage not to look away. We reached town by dusk. Small place, 1 gas station, 2 bars, and a post office that hadn't updated its hours since the 80s. Danny dropped us off in silence. Said he needed to keep driving. Said he couldn't be in one place too long right now. I understood. I don't think any of us wanted to stay anywhere for long, not with the weight of what we'd left behind riding in the quiet spaces of our minds. Aaron offered to drive me back to the cabin. He didn't say anything the whole ride, just watched the road, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the dash like it might disappear if he didn't hold on tight. When we got there, he didn't come inside, just nodded once and pulled away. The sound of his engine faded fast in the cold. I stood there for a long time just staring at the porch. It hadn't changed. Same broken railing, same porch light that flickered when the wind picked up. Same cassette recorder sitting on the windowsill covered in dust. I stepped inside and dropped the backpack by the fire. The air inside was colder than I expected. Or maybe it was me. I lit the stove, put water on, did it all without thinking. Muscle memory. The body doing what the mind couldn't. I pulled out Julian's journal, set it on the table. Then I reached for the old box I hadn't touched in 2 decades. Tapes, photos, letters. Things I'd buried when forgetting felt like survival. I found the one I wanted. The cassette labeled Will, Cabin 1999. I slid it into the recorder. Pressed play. The hiss came first, then static, then his voice. Young, fragile, singing off-key. It was some old campfire song. Probably something he learned from school. His voice cracked halfway through, but he kept going. Not because anyone was listening, just because it made him feel less alone. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I was back there, not in the clearing, not in the fog, but on that first night, when we roasted marshmallows, told bad jokes, and promised each other we'd always have each other's backs. Back when Will still believed in us. The tape ended. I didn't rewind it. Didn't need to. I left it running. Let the silence afterward fill the room like a benediction. Outside, the wind picked up. Not strong. Just steady. I heard it before I felt it. 3 knocks. Not on the door. Not on the walls. Somewhere deeper. Like the earth remembering its own heartbeat. I didn't move, didn't check, just sat there staring into the flames. And I swear, for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel alone, not watched, not haunted, just seen. The knocks came again. 3 soft beats, not a threat, a reminder that somewhere out there past the trees and the time and the truth we tried to bury, there are things that don't forget. Things that don't care if we believe in them. They just are, and they're still watching, still listening, still waiting for us to remember what we once promised never to forget. Sometimes the things we fear the most are not monsters at all, but mirrors, quiet reflections of what we've left behind, what we failed to protect, what we tried to forget. And in the heart of the forest, where time doesn't move like it does out here, those reflections don't vanish. They wait, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with memory. This story wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about whether something exists or doesn't. It was about what happens when we finally stop running. When we look into the dark and recognize not a threat, but a wound. A wound we helped open. One that stayed open long after we turned away. There's a silence that lives in regret. It grows roots. It reshapes the way we carry ourselves, the way we sleep, the way we love, the way we try so hard to forget what's asking to be remembered. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's a path back. Not to undo what was done, but to acknowledge it, to sit with it, to say, I see you, I remember. Because memory is more than a recollection. It's a responsibility and compassion, real, raw, uncomfortable compassion. Begins the moment we stop trying to define what deserves it. Some things don't speak our language. They don't use words. They live in the in-between places, the quiet corners, the eyes we dare to meet, and still they feel, they hurt, they forgive. They got. Maybe the truest kind of humanity is found not in what we conquer, but in what we choose to stand beside, even when the world tells us to be afraid. So thank you for walking this path with me. For listening, for feeling, for holding on to the parts of the story that don't scream, but whisper. And if this story left something inside you, if it stirred a question, or a memory, or just a feeling you can't quite name, don't let it fade. Share it. Carry it. And if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Make sure to follow or subscribe if you haven't already. There's more to come. More stories, more echoes, more things waiting to be remembered. Until then, stay kind, stay curious, and above all, don't forget what watches in the quiet.